Before we get to the actual email trail that Donald Trump Jr. released yesterday himself, this bit of reporting from this morning's New York Times is significant. Quoting from the paper, as Air Force One jetted back from Europe on Saturday, a small cadre of Mr. Trump's advisors huddled in a cabin, helping to craft a statement for the president's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., to give to the New York Times, explaining why he met last summer with a lawyer connected to the Russian government. Participants on the plane and back in the U.S. debated how transparent to be in the statement, according to people familiar with the discussions. Ultimately, the people said the president signed off on a statement from Donald Trump Jr. for the Times that was so incomplete that it required day after day of follow-up statements, each more revealing than the last.
Willie, it was just a lie. That statement was a lie. It had to do with adoptions. They had to retract it immediately. They have to keep retracting statements. It got so bad yesterday that Donald Trump Jr. he knew the Times was about to completely expose what he had said as a lie and what the White House had said as a lie. But this is part of at least Saturday was part of a White House cover-up.
Well, that right there, what you just saw, and you just said it, was an attempt by the White House, signed off by the President of the United States, to cover up this story. And then Donald Trump Jr. last night in his interview with Fox News went away from that story completely because of what the content of those emails was, which said, quote, Hillary's part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. That was very explicit in that email from Goldstone to Donald Trump Jr. This is about Hillary and potential ties to Russia, and this is part of Russia's support for Mr. Trump. Nothing to do with adoption inside that meeting until later when they realized there was no information that they could use about Hillary Clinton.
Well, that they're telling us. Actually, another part of the lie, and a very significant part of the lie for the investigators, Mike Barnacle, is the fact that Don Jr. also lied, saying, oh, well, Manafort and Kushner weren't made aware of what this meeting was about. He forwarded the entire email chain that said right off the top, Russia, Clinton, private, and confidential. He forwarded everything. So he lied even about Jared Kushner not knowing. He lied about Paul Manafort not knowing. They are lying every single day.
And he has thus placed Jared Kushner in I would think, great legal peril. Certainly he's put him in peril of losing his security clearance, Jared Kushner. But what the emails really do point out and point to is that I don't know what the exact definition of collusion is. I'm not a lawyer, but I do know what the exact definition of right and wrong is, and this was wrong. I also know that the emails prove beyond a shadow of a doubt when the President of the United States said last week in Europe that nobody really knows whether Russia was involved. Well, we now know for sure that Russia was involved, and we now know for sure that Donald Trump Jr. sat there and was willing to participate with Russia.
You've got to expand this out now. We can no longer, Mark Halpern, just say that Donald Trump Jr. was willing to participate. We now have to say, because those emails were forwarded with a blaring headline that talked about Russia, Clinton, private and confidential, that Jared Kushner was willing to sit down, and Paul Manafort was willing to sit down with someone that they believed to be an agent of the Kremlin, being part of a conspiracy between the Kremlin and any willing participants they could find in the Trump administration to help Donald Trump get elected president of the United States. It's all in that email, all forwarded to Jared Kushner, and all forwarded to Paul Manafort. And I can guarantee you that neither one of those gentlemen went into that meeting without reading that email.
And Donald Trump Jr. strikingly did not back off from that position yesterday, still taking the position that, hey, if it's good information, who cares if it would come from the Russians, as long as it was confirming things he wanted confirmed. There's so much going on now that we're seeing in the last few days with Donald Trump Jr. There are stories in the Washington Post and New York Times today that get at some of what is going on behind the scenes, both at the White House and on Capitol Hill.
We'll talk about that, Mark, because I know there are a lot of people wondering exactly what's going on behind the scenes. But by all accounts that we've personally heard, and you can also read in the newspapers, it's chaos behind the scenes. It is like They sound like they're on the Titanic and they know it just hit something hard, an immovable object.
It's only a 3-hour show, so we can't talk about all the things that are going on, but I'll just list a couple that I've picked up. One is this position that Donald Jr. is taking and others around him are taking in a core group, that this was fine, that getting information from the Russians that was negative about Hillary Clinton would have been fine. That has really shocked a lot of Republicans, including a lot of Trump loyalists in Washington, who say that is not fine with them. And that makes them, for the first time, people I talked to yesterday, suspicious that there's something to this that they didn't think it was. This is not, in their view now, a media creation. There's something here. And again, as the stories this morning accurately say, there is chaos within the White House, more than even usual, as people look at where these leaks are coming from. The Times has identified some of the sources as coming from inside the White House. And there's real concern about what is happening. Is this an attempt to get rid of Jared Kushner? Is this an attempt to undermine the president's legal team? There is a lot of theorizing, not a lot of defending of what happened in this meeting. And the last thing is, and this is not a surprise, obviously, to anyone who's followed this, but the president is said to be consumed by this, even more than he has been over the last few months, with few other occasions matching his focus on this and the news coverage of this minute by minute.
And Mika, there are conservative writers that have been skeptical about Russia from the beginning, who yesterday broke and said this at least shows them that David French, who hasn't been skeptical, but he was like, maybe there's been too much of a reliance on it. But David French with the National Review and several others who said, wasn't sure about the Russian investigation, but now I know. Not only is it not a diversion, I think David French said it's a national priority.
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to ignore or blame it on fake news when Donald Trump Jr. is actually tweeting the information.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.